today's webinar. If you've just joined us, the topic today we're looking at is how to really empower your agents. There's a strong correlation, I believe, between agent empowerment and customer satisfaction. But agent empowerment is something that's very easy to say, but is actually quite difficult. You can say to your agents, you know, right, you're all empowered to do what's absolutely right by the customer. But it's really, unless you back processes and management philosophy and leadership behind it, it can be very difficult to achieve. So we've pulled together a group of experts that I'm delighted to have today on today's webinar. I'd like to start off by introducing to you, those of you who don't know Carolyn Blunt from Real Results Training, to our webinar today. Carolyn, welcome.
Thank you very much, John T.
And I know agent empowerment is one of your hot topics you talk about and do training on it as part of your management and team leadership courses.
Absolutely, it's a real critical part of customer experience, and it's a good thing to have for retaining your agents as well. So I see it as a really critical element in this day and age, and it links massively with personalisation, which I'll talk about as well.
Excellent, and I'm delighted to introduce on her first webinar with us to Emma Bridger from People Lab. Emma, if people aren't familiar with People Lab, would you like to explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, so we focus on employee engagement, very specifically in that area, so on the internal side. But you know, going back to what you mentioned before, John T, absolutely overwhelming body of evidence that shows that if you get it right with your people, they're engaged. The results in terms of increasing customer satisfaction, lowering attrition, all those business outcomes that we're after are impacted positively by engaged employees, and empowerment or autonomy is a key part of that.
Excellent. And we're also joined on our panel today by David Evans from Business Systems. David's attended a number of webinars over the years. And David, you can comment on any questions that people have about technology. Are there any technology areas where you think agent empowerment can be helped by?
Definitely, John T. I'm very passionate about a couple of areas, one being workforce management and self-service, so how we can empower our agents and employees through employee portals, for example, to sort of take control of their own shift patterns. And also things as well like analytics, speech analytics or interaction analytics, where we can really drill down to 100% of the interactions to see what people are saying and how empowered our employees are. It gives you some great insight.
Excellent. So some great insight there. And as you know, this is an Ask the Experts webinar, and the focus on these webinars is around the questions that you have. So if you have any questions that you'd like to send in, please do that. Put that into our chat room, which is at the bottom here, callcenterhelper.com/chat. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You can watch a recording and replay of the slides. That's on this link here, callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. And if you'd like to go into our chat room and ask hashtag question for a question, hashtag tip for a tip, and you can put it into the chat room here. Here's the link, callcenterhelper.com/chat, and you can download the webinar slides here. So to help guide the discussion today, I've asked Carolyn Blunt from Real Results to put together a few short thoughts on how to bring in and improve employee engagement. So I'd like to pass the baton across to Carolyn, and if you'd just like to share your thoughts.
Okay, will do. Thank you. I'll set my my timer going because you know I can talk for England on this topic, but I'm going to try and keep it for about 8 minutes or so, and I'm going to talk to you about some stuff that I've picked up along the way. So I've been doing this for about 15 years, working with clients in the contact centre world as a people expert. So the first thing I'd like to do is to take a look at the link that exists between agent empowerment and customer satisfaction, because when you empower your front line, something amazing happens. So when you give them ownership of customer contacts, you will be liberating them to solve problems. So this might be through a gesture of goodwill policy or something similar. So rather than asking the line manager for permission to apply a credit or a refund or a goodwill gesture compensation, you just allow them to get on with it up to a certain amount. It's a say yes campaign. So a lot of people will say to me, yes, Carolyn, we do that. And you absolutely might have a documented process that says that that is allowed to happen. But I'd recommend going back through your data and analysing the take-up on that at both a team and an individual level, because it's not uncommon to find pockets in the contact centre of people using either too much or quite often not enough goodwill, and that's because of fear of getting their knuckles wrapped and management styles. So definitely dig back through that. Once we've got that right, it hugely impacts on the advisor's job satisfaction, their morale. People want to come to work and make a difference. So when they feel that they can do that and they can kind of have ideas in the moment about what to do, that's so rewarding for them, which is massively going to help you with agent retention as well. And as we know, it can cost up to half of an agent's first year's salary to recruit and replace them. So we shouldn't underestimate the indirect cost of that. So the benefit of allowing this empowerment to happen, it pays back itself. And then that's without even starting to factor in the impact that you're going to get on customer satisfaction, loyalty, your retention of customers, and also the efficiency savings. So by not spending that time putting the customer on hold and going through hoops to get permission to do something fairly obvious and simple, that's really beneficial as well. So that's worth thinking about. So let's just spend some time thinking about what the link really look like, sound like and feel like in your contact centre on a daily basis. So when we want to give agents empowerment, we've got to make sure that we're supporting them with a decent knowledge management system. So customers want fast and knowledgeable agents, and without that, your agents are working with their hands tied behind their backs. And the system needs well indexed, up to date, easy to use. You need to be able to read the information at speed and for it not to be a wordy kind of convoluted document store. And now let's just have a think about what should be the fun part of empowerment. This is what I call the wow moments in customer experience. And this is where, through empowerment, you're encouraging your advisors to have ideas and to make decisions. So on previous webinars, I've talked about the advisor who sent a cuddly Peppa Pig toy with an engineer when a customer's cable TV had broken, and she mentioned that her young daughter had missed her favourite Peppa Pig TV show. So the agent had that idea, wouldn't it be great, and was able to execute that through the service chain. And it went viral on social media. It was fantastic. And then there was the agent who had a new O2 handset delivered to a customer's holiday hotel, but also had the idea to send a bottle of champagne and arrange with the hotel that a butler would be on the steps with it on a tray. So there's all these kind of extra pieces that don't necessarily cost an awful lot. I mean, the Peppa Pig toy was like $5.99 or something, but the impact that had for the business, for the customer, and for that advisor was huge. So having a kind of a process which says you're allowed to do this stuff, but also where are the wow moments, and here are some examples of what that might be. It's those little touches that make the difference to customers and really make agents feel great. And then the last thing I just want to touch on here is about having respect for the front line. So, it sounds fairly obvious that that should exist, but I've worked with a lot of clients where the front line are trying to get answers or commitments from other parts of the business and the service chain. They're trying to get information, and then they're trying to place, kind of calls through, and other parts of the business are not answering their phone to the front line quickly enough or at all. And there's a bit of an attitude sometimes of, well, that's customers, we don't speak to customers, that's your job. So it's really difficult for advisors to act out on their empowerment if they're not supported by the other parts of business. So that's really key as well. So I have a question for you all, which is, are you listening to what your frontline are saying? Because when it comes to knowing how best to empower your particular advisors to help your particular customers, your frontline can probably tell you what they need better than I can. So, one of the things that I'm really going to advocate that you think about after this webinar is whether you're running focus groups regularly with your frontline and asking them what they think the pain points are in the customer journey and what else would help them to do their jobs better. And I think you'll get a wealth of information from doing that. So I'm going to give you a few ideas. Focus groups, as I say, is one of them. Having suggestion schemes in place, that's really important as well. They're relatively cheap to do and you can get great results from those. But it's really important that we include that feedback loop for advisors as well as to why their suggestions aren't adopted. Say yes campaigns, so yeah, just give the customer what they want. And that's really key. So doing some observations, so actually sitting in the contact centre and seeing how they're using the knowledge management system, because I've worked with clients who think they've got a great knowledge management system, but when I sit in the contact centre, the advisors aren't using it. And when I ask them why they're not using it, they say, well, it's just quicker or easier to just put the customer on hold and go and ask my friend. And they like getting out of their seat and walking across and speaking to somebody. So that's not necessarily the most effective. So we need to do some observations, do some call listening, and really analyse the insight that's available to you in your business. So looking at your metrics, looking at the anecdotal comments that are coming back through from customers as well. And really what we're digging for in that analysis is what could have made this customer experience even better. So that's the question that I constantly have in my mind when I go and work and do consultancy with clients. And this is about, making sure the advisor is empowered beyond things like just free gifts and compensation. It's also about the freedom maybe to make an outbound call, proactively to check up with a customer. It could just be a simple apology that would have made it better. So are your advisors doing those things? So if you only do one thing from now, I've given you quite a few already and I'm going to give you three. Choose at least one thing that you can do. So I'm going to say check the service attitude of your teams. If you don't check the service attitude, you might find that you've got all the policies and procedures in place, but people aren't necessarily using them. So that's because they just have this kind of niggle with customers sometimes. If you're not being nice to me, why should I be nice to you? So they're all after something for nothing, that kind of attitude. That's not going to implement a gesture for goodwill policy through correctly. So it doesn't matter in that case how well you think you've created that culture for empowerment, it's going to come up against that block and it's going to be wasted. The next thing I would say is training, and obviously I'm going to say that because I run a training company, but it really is important that advisors are getting it right first time. Otherwise you just create a vicious circle with the compensation culture. This isn't just about chucking money at the problem and just using it as a sticking plaster. We do need to get to the root cause. So I would say connect the dots with the service chain and remove the pain points, but then when things still need a little bit of an extra smoothing out, that your advisors are empowered to think and to wow and to take action to make that happen. So if you would like more stuff from me, there's a free ebook that you can download here on this URL, and you are also absolutely welcome to connect with me on Facebook, Twitter or LinkedIn. And I'm going to be around for questions on the panel, obviously, as well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Karen. And certainly some great food for thought, and some, if you could only do one thing, ideas, which I think is absolutely great. One of the ideas that Karen talked about there was around running customer focus groups. So we're going to just run a short poll now that says, are you running customer focus groups with your frontline employees? So if you'd just like to vote on that now, if you'd like to put the details in. Carolyn, do you think many people are doing this?
I would like to say yes, but I think in reality, not official focus groups, no. I think maybe we're doing suggestion schemes and team meetings and things like that where your more vocal advisors might speak up. But I think there's a need for more contact centres to be facilitating official focus groups with a real cross-section.
Well, let's have a look at the results, and it is almost like a Brexit referendum. The results on here: 52% of people do customer focus groups, and 48% of people are not doing focus groups. So I think there's some very good room for improvement. David, I don't know if you've ever found, but one thing I find that customer focus groups ought to be renamed, because the one things that they often don't do is focus.
No, indeed. No, this is why, some of the work we do with analytics, you can actually start to understand what the customer's saying, the whole voice of the customer. So it's a great tool, really, to look at 100% of what your customers are saying at any time, really. But I'm with you again on that one, John C.
Excellent. Well, we're now going to time to jump across to the top tips and questions, and we're going to jump across to Rachel on the in the chat room. And Rachel, if you'd like to say what's been going on, have we got any questions from the audience?
Yes. Can you see my screen?
We can, yeah.
Fab. So we've had one question in. Just push this across. What is best practice for agents setting their own shift patterns, i.e. shifts, shift swaps, or setting their own shifts? What are the downsides, David, do you think?
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I could definitely cover this one. So best practice for setting their own shift patterns. What we tend to find is it's great to give people two things, really: control and flexibility. So setting their own shift patterns, there's sort of different variances on it in terms of self-scheduling. Things like preference scheduling, for example, which is a great one for agents to go down. So you may, for example, be a student, for example, and you might not want to work weekends or certain times during the day because you're at college. So via the technology, through workforce management and potentially through your employee portal, you could allow your employees to set their own preferences, and then hopefully they can be built into the schedules. There is also the ultimate self-scheduling in terms of flexible shifts, which is availability staffing or availability patterns. So this is really where you're actually stating to say to the organisation when you can actually work. So you might be working 2 jobs, therefore you, again, wouldn't want to work at certain days, so you can actually specify the days you are available to work. And again, that can be built into your schedules. Shift swaps is always a good one. What I tend to find when we're in the organisations who are doing it correctly, it's great to be able to build in some what we call tolerances into shift swaps to make it more flexible, to allow people to have different options. And what I mean by that is, for example, rather than just swapping a 4-hour shift for a 4-hour shift, can I swap my 4-hour shift with a 7-hour shift? Or, for example, if it's nice and sunny on Friday, I might want to swap my day off with you. So providing that sort of flexibility is great. And also, in terms of shift swaps, not just swapping with individuals, potentially setting up some sort of shift trade board where you can go and put your shifts that you want to trade on there anonymously, and people can trade against those. I guess in terms of the downsides, it's all in the planning, really. So one thing I'd say with things like shift swaps, etc., if you're bringing in this sort of flexible staffing and it's not been done in the organisation before, you don't want to disengage your staff initially, so potentially running it on a sample team or a set of teams just to make sure the functionality is there and they're happy with it.
Brandy's just actually put in the chat room, for the company I work for, we use Shiftboard, which we offer various times for agents to select from. Within that has a trade board to be able to be swapped, so kind of like a trading floor, I suppose.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to do it. So rather than swapping with someone you can just go in, put that down the shift trade board, and people can then log in, and they can log in hopefully from within the organisation, but hopefully they can also log in from home as well. Sitting at home on a Sunday night, I fancy swapping a shift next week. Can I see if any are available? Great news, I can go ahead and do it. And even better, it'd be great if that's just auto-approved then and there automatically, so it doesn't have to go into any queue. It can go directly through some business rules, and if it's all okay, let's do it there and then, and it's done.
Great. We've had a couple of opinions in. Tina says, I run an outsourced sales centre, and there's only so much that I can really give them in terms of responsibility. The process is pretty flat and straightforward. It lacks a bit of depth. And Lisa said, we have a tool in our CRM that gives power by time with the company abilities. Seasonal workers have much more limited power or authority than our full-time agents. That's an interesting one, Carolyn. Do you think?
Yeah. Well, will really come into its own. Want to invest loads. I don't know why that would be. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Is that working?
Yeah.
Strange.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't want to invest loads of time in seasonal worker training because they're gonna move on. So that's where knowledge management is really key. So if they can look at the answers, then there's no reason why we can't start to empower them as well.
We've had a question in from Brandy, and she's asked, what have been the most successful options for empowering team members? Emma, what would you say would be some great options?
I think for me, it's not to make any assumptions about what will be most successful to ask them. I'm actually going to pick this up in my slides, but there is no substitute for going out and asking your people what works for them. And, there is no off-the-shelf one-size-fits-all. There are differences in every company and every team even. So I think the most successful thing is to say to them, actually, what would work for you? What would make the difference for you? So that would be my piece of advice. Sorry, not very helpful. But, it's amazing what happens when you do start to have those conversations, and picking up what Carolyn said in her presentation, actually listening, really turning up the listening and running things like focus groups, incredibly powerful for people thinking, actually, you do care about what I have to say. Maybe I will put forward ideas or make suggestions. Maybe I will start to change my behaviour. Because as I think you kind of mentioned at the beginning, there's a kind of cultural readiness piece to empowerment. And if you work in a very autocratic, process-driven, kind of hierarchical organisation, and then you say, right, we're going to try this empowerment thing, go away, you're all empowered to do what you want, people are going to go, well, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do, am I allowed, is it okay, what are the repercussions? So it is a kind of a step process really to get there. So I think starting off by saying, actually, what would work for you? Let's take some small steps. What could we do easily here and now? What's in our gift to control is the best way to do this.
I think that's a really excellent point, because it's very similar to some of the stuff when we're deploying the technology, when we're looking at self-service. It's every customer wants something different, every organisation is different, and it is a massive cultural change to suddenly say to people, hang on a minute, you've had your shifts given to you X many years, now go ahead guys, you can choose your own. So it's not just the technology, it's more of a cultural change often than not.
I think there's one that, to me, that really says more than anything else in terms of getting going, and that is the abandoning average handling time as an agent measurement or an agent target, because I think nothing quite speaks like that, saying whatever it takes, you can spend as long as you want to with the customer to get things resolved, and that can be very, very hard if people are used to it, or they've come in from another contact center and they say, what's the top target talk time? And they're going, there isn't. So people come in, and that can be very uncomfortable, and it can take a long time to do. I remember Carolyn, an anecdote used to tell about how one contact centre did away with talk time targets, but one of the supervisors had written up their team's talk time on the whiteboard, which kind of shot all that hard work in the foot.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's got to be, whatever you decide to do, there's got to be consistency and follow through right the way across the leadership level. You can't have, this message going out and some managers doing it and other managers not. So that creates more confusion.
Yeah. Michael's actually added into the chat room, empowered team members by including them in decisions, projects, training new staff, etc. So that was a great reply as well.
Yeah.
So Talia sent in a question. She's asked, what happens if the agents are automatically going to the most amount of goodwill gestures and are automatically giving away full goodwill gestures to any customer? Carolyn, what would you say?
This is what I mean about the training piece. So I would be having them into training sessions and looking at example customer problems, and then saying, what are your ideas, and encouraging them to think about where they could give something less, where, you know, try an apology. If that doesn't work, go to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage, rather than immediately jumping in. So it's about training, practice, coaching, reinforcement, monitoring what they're doing, and then coming off the phones and having some one-to-one coaching. You know, talk to me about why you did that, and, you know, why you didn't necessarily think about something different. So someone needs to be having those conversations.
I heard one story from an insurance company that was quite interesting, where they used to have to get an assessor to do every claim, and they brought in an arrangement. I think it was £200 was the amount that an agent could agree over the phone, and they actually found that the volume of claims actually, the value of claims actually went down, and that was sort of something they hadn't expected, and that was two reasons for that. The first is the agents were very good at spotting where people were trying it on, and if people were trying it on, then they'd say you have to follow the claims process. But there was another one that said, well, you claim this is £300 for your carpet that's been damaged. I can offer you £200 today, or we can send out an assessor who will come and have a look at your carpet, and you know, it might take a couple of weeks for them to come out. And quite often the customer would say, oh, okay, I'll take the £200. So it was actually speeded the whole process up, and it reduced the value, which I thought was they were very surprised about that.
Yeah, it's just again about having that training with those advisors, so they know what to try in different circumstances.
Yeah. We've had an audience opinion in. If an agent has to get something above their pay grade approved by me, I allow them to go back to the customer and say, I spoke to the manager because I felt you should be given this credit, and she agreed. I want to make this the best experience possible for you. This makes the agent the winner in the situation, along with the good customer experience, which goes back to what Carolyn was just saying. Finally, we've had a tip sent in from Gemma, who said, if someone is not behaving in the expected manner despite being empowered, investigate the thinking around this to change that, rather than just the problem. So if a sales agent is empowered to do something customer service-wise, but is not doing so, the thinking will be that it is a waste, as it does not gain a sale, and so the empowerment needs to change. So back to you, Jonty.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that. I think some great comments from the audience. We're going to jump across to Emma from People Lab. And Emma, if you could share with us your thoughts around employee engagement, I think it would be absolutely fascinating to see.
Cool. Can you...
So you should just have had the baton pass across to you there.
My slides, yeah?
That's it.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. So I'm going to contradict myself slightly of what I said before. So as I said, employee engagement is very personal, and we are all motivated and engaged by slightly different things. However, there are some universal themes. And I think if you only do three things, then focus on what we call autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy we've talked about already. The more autonomy you can give to people, that tends to link to their engagement. So people like to have a say in their job. A lot of frustration, disengagement occurs when people are coming into work, they're doing the job, and the company's getting in the way of them doing it effectively. And they have great ideas, and they know how things could work and should work, but they don't have the capacity to be involved in those decisions. So any way you can give autonomy, give that autonomy. And I think it's quite surprising that companies, I think, often believe, going back to the point I made before about, you know, if we give people autonomy, what will they come up with? What will they want? Their expectations will be through the roof, and we'll be able to manage it. But actually, in my experience, is people that work for you get the company, they get the context, they want to do the right thing. And where I've seen this work really well is by just kind of taking a bit of a risk and saying, okay, well, you figure it out, you solve it. For example, with setting shift patterns, I've worked with call centres that have done that really effectively and said, you know what, you know, you're not children, you're adults, you can figure it out, you come up with the right result, you figure it out, and it's worked fantastically well. The second bullet on there is mastery. So going back to Carolyn's points about training, for example, you know, people want to make progress at work, and that might be in a formal career development progression pathway. it just might be, you know what, I want to get better at something. I want to feel like I'm really great at my job. I want to have the skills and capabilities to do the best thing I can by the customer. So again, giving agents the possibility, the potential, the opportunity to get better at whatever it is they do, whether that's formal or informal, contributes hugely to employee engagement. And the last one, purpose. So people want to feel there's a point to what they're doing. We're hearing more and more about meaning and purpose at work, and people wanting to understand that there's a reason behind what they do. So actually going back to the question about the goodwill payments, you know, my experience, I completely support everything that Carolyn said, but to add on to that, if people get the reason behind the decisions that are made, they get it and they go, okay, so I understand the bigger picture, I understand the strategy, I understand why these decisions are being made, I understand the purpose. Again, that links to engagement. And there is a fantastic YouTube clip which I'd highly recommend you have a look at. It's an RSA Animates clip by a chap called Dan Pink, called The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us. And I think it will be quite a good challenge for lots of people in the world of call centres, because it essentially says that it's not money. So a lot of us think, oh, if we want more of X, Y, and Z, if we want to incentivise someone, we'll just chuck more money at them. But actually, we know that this isn't the way the world works, despite our kind of thinking. So I'd highly recommend that you take a look at that. It's about 10 minutes long.
What we'll do on that, Emma, is we'll dig out the clip, or if you can send it to us, we'll post that onto the website.
It's well worth a look, and some really good science behind that. It's good behavioural economics and psychology, and it's well worth a look, and will really make you rethink how to get the most out of people. And essentially, it's these three things. It's not money. The second area I'd like to look at is, again, some of the how of engagement. So we talk about the enablers of engagement. I've already kind of touched on some of these already. So first of all, no surprise, line managers. This slide's actually taken from a recent piece of research that we did that asked companies to tell us about what they were focusing on when it comes to engagement, and 71% are looking at line managers. We had about 85 companies take part in that research. And again, I think I've got some on the last slide details of how you could download that if it's of interest. But you know, line managers do get a bashing a lot of the time. You know, we blame them for a lot of stuff. It's all down to management. You know, but actually, how good are companies at really investing in the skills and capability of their line managers? And I think where companies are good at that and genuinely put their money where their mouth is, you absolutely see that pay off. So, you know, we know that managers have a massive impact on how empowered I feel and how engaged I feel. So anyone that's worked for a bad manager will know how that makes them feel, and everything can be great about the job, but if you work for a bad manager, you know, we talk about the fact that people leave managers, not companies. I think that's very true. And on the flip side, people that have worked for a great manager, again, you know how that feels, that you get they get the best out of you, you're empowered, you're engaged, life is sweet. So, you know, absolutely, line managers have a huge part to play, but we need to kind of give them the skills and capabilities to do this. It's not something people naturally know how to do. Well, some do, but many don't. You know, we need to teach managers and train managers in how to engage and empower people, and it isn't just saying to people, you're empowered. There's a lot more to it than that. We've already talked about employee voice quite a lot, so this is the listening part that Carolyn talked about. So again, the more we can give agents a voice, and they're listened to, and their opinions count, the more engaged they'll be and the more empowered they'll be. And this is a journey, so if you start to sort of say to people, yes, we're interested in what you think, at first you might meet a lot of cynicism and, you know, yeah, really, you're really going to listen, but it's those small changes that can make a big difference. So people suggest something, it might seem like a really small thing, but actually it's taken on board, something changes, and they say, okay, you listened that time, I might be a bit more confident next time. So employee voice, really important. Strategic narrative is really about painting a compelling picture and vision of the future of the company, where it's heading and how people fit into that. We need to know that there's a point to what we're doing, that we're part of something bigger. And finally, integrity. And I think your point, John T, about average call handling times is a great example of a lack of integrity. If companies say, you know, yeah, we want you to do the right thing by the customer, and you know, we want to empower you to do whatever is needed, but we're still going to measure you on average call handling times, and that's a real lack of integrity, and that's a way to disengage people. So you've got to basically match your say with what you'll do. So that's what we're talking about there. And then finally, please don't be put off by the term appreciative inquiry. It's basically, this is about taking a strength-based approach to engagement. And actually, if you think about your focus group example, I'm a big fan of focus groups, listening groups, but the problem with these often is that they're very negative. They're a whinge session, they're a moaning session. People come in and tell you everything that's wrong, everything that's not working, and it's like getting blood from a stone to get them to suggest ideas and recommendations. In my experience, just flipping that slightly and using this essentially 4-step approach is incredibly powerful to have a very different conversation. So imagine going into a focus group with agents and saying, what's working at the moment, what's the best of what is. Talk about a great example of customer experience where we absolutely did the right thing. Let's talk about those. Let's not even think about all the times we get it wrong. Let's talk about the best of what is or has been recently. That's what we call a kind of discovery appreciating session. And then we might move them forward to the next bubble, which is about what could be. So let's fast forward 12 months and imagine that we have the best customer experience in the industry. You love coming to work. It's a fantastic place to work. You are empowered to be your very best. What's different? What's that look like? What's it feel like? And you can even have a bit of fun with that and maybe get them to make videos or mood boards or something like that. And then you kind of move it around to the third bubble, which is, okay, we've talked about what good looks like, we've talked about what could be, now let's talk about what should be. So let's kind of take that anything's possible and get a little bit more realistic. Start to think about what are the changes that we should make, what are the absolute kind of deal breakers here. And then the last bubble is kind of the how we get there. For me, this is where the empowerment comes in. So we talk about what's the role that you personally, individually, as a team can play in taking us to that future we've described and talked about. So there's always stuff that might have to go back into the ivory tower to be fixed if it's a system problem, for example, but there will always be plenty of ideas that come forward that actually individuals would have within their gift to control to make a difference on. And this, for me, is as a really simple tool to empower agents and any employees to make changes and to sort of give them permission to do things differently. So quite simple, don't be put off by the language, but very, very powerful approach to basically making change in organisations happen. And I've just put on finally this, it's a recommendation slide. This came out from the recent research that we did on employee engagement. And you can read the whole report, you can download the whole report, white paper, if it's of interest. But some of the problems are that we don't really know what we mean by engagement, and we've already flagged that what do we mean by empowerment. We need to make sure we're really clear about what this means. We need to invest for success, whether that's training, development, whatever that might be. We need to put our money where our mouth is. We need to start with the end in mind, so be really clear about where it is we're trying to go with this, what are the goals and outcomes we're looking to change. We need to develop experts. We can't expect line managers just to know how to do this stuff. It's, you kind of need some help, some support, some development in this area. And related to that, we need to unblock the leadership barrier. And we need to understand people get very confused with employee engagement, saying there's internal communications. We'll just send out some leaflets or some desktops or some emails and that will do it. And it's not the same thing. It is quite different. So those are kind of some ideas to finish on. And there's a slide there that's got all my contact details if you want to get in touch.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for that, Emma. I think there's some great food for thought in there, and a sort of systematic approach. Certainly, I think line managers, I'd agree with you, play a very large part in that, and perhaps training is an area that could be done better. One of the points you raised there, Emma, on if you could only do one of three things, was autonomy. So I want to ask a question now of how autonomous are your agents in your contact center. So here's 5 scenarios. Can agents set their own schedules? Can they swap shifts without approval? Can they go and visit another department to resolve a customer issue? And I'm talking about sort of like after-call work type issue here. Are they able to give a £50 refund to a customer with no prior approval needed, or do they have no targets for average handling time or average talk time? So if you just like to vote on the options there, I think this is going to be absolutely fascinating to see the results of this. And let's just close the voting here and share the results up on the screen. So we've got quite an interesting one here. David, only 14% of people are allowed to set their own schedules, but 38% are allowed to swap shifts without approval, which I think is quite encouraging.
Yeah, it's very encouraging actually from the trading of shifts. Setting their own schedules slightly low, but potentially they may be in an organisation without the technology to do that. But it's great to see shift swaps so high.
72% of people are allowed to get up and visit another department to resolve a customer query. That sounds very good. It makes me wonder why we've got so many broken processes. Emma, quite interesting. Only 21% of people are able to give a £50 refund without needing approval. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the purpose piece for me. If there's a really good business rationale for doing this, and that's explained to agents, people go, you know what, I might like it, but I get it, so I'm okay with that. But if there's not a good business rationale behind it, and that's what causes the frustrations. I think it's about understanding what sits behind some of these decisions. The frustrations that you hear when you speak to agents. Are they explained? Are they given good business case? And people go, okay, I get it, that's fair enough, or I still don't understand why that's the case.
And I think what's lovely to see here now, 48% of our audience have no average handling time targets, which I think is absolutely amazing. So if you have removed average handling time as a target, perhaps you'd like to share some of your experience in the chat room. It's a question I asked is, I get the idea, but actually doing it would be very difficult. Wouldn't that make things worse? So if you'd like to share some of your experience, I think would be great to see. Right, we're going to jump across now to Rachel in the chat room, and we're going to have a look at any other questions that we've got coming through. So I've seen the chat room has been absolutely humming away there.
Yes, been typing up very quickly. So we've had a question for you, Carolyn. My opinion is that empowerment only works with a strong leadership team who can set expectations and coach staff to be as productive and effective as possible with the power they have. Empowerment can go the other way if this doesn't exist and can be detrimental to the business. Empowering your agents is only as effective as the quality of your management and leadership team. Do you agree, Carolyn? That's from Glendon.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with that. And it's also about it being consistent. So what I was talking about before, we might send messages through training interventions to say, yes, you are empowered to do this, and then we'll see pockets of advisors who are then doing it under their leadership that they've got, and then others that aren't, and that's because they've got weaker and negative leaders who aren't comfortable with that, or there's a blame culture that's instilling fear in them. So I absolutely do agree with that, yeah.
What about the rest of the panel? Would you agree, Emma?
Oh, good.
Yeah, it goes back to the point I made before about the cultural readiness of the organisation and looking at, I'm sure you've heard of the kind of transaction analysis of parent-child, adult sort of ideas, and if you've got an adult-to-adult culture, then it's probably easier, but if you've got a parent-child culture, you absolutely need to make sure that you've got your leadership lined up and ready to support this. So yeah, I'd agree.
And David, you were about to say something?
Sorry.
Yeah, just going to say, I think we touched on it earlier, obviously, as Emma just mentioned, a big cultural change, so it needs to be managed very carefully initially to make sure that it's hitting the right spot.
Fab, was that you, Carolyn?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because Glendon mentions the quality team as well in there, so it's important that whatever you are putting through as a kind of empowerment, gesture of goodwill, usage, whatever, that you're building that into your quality framework as well, so that that is part of the topic of discussion as standard when you're having these coaching conversations.
Great. We've had an opinion in from Andrew, who said, we currently have 45% of our contacts contact centre empowered to give various options, from 20% discounts to timed appointments, closely monitored and agents overusing sat with agents with very little usage. Is that about what you'd expect, David?
45%, yeah, it seems quite reasonable to me. Various options, so they've got, looks like they've got a few options there, 20% discounts, etc. So that seems reasonable from my perspective.
Yeah. Anyone else? Carolyn, was that what you'd expect?
Yeah, this is the thing about some agents overusing it and some agents with very little usage. So we need to understand what's going on there. Is it their own individual understanding of the process and how to use it correctly, or is it the managers that are above them that are culturally driving that slightly different approach?
We've had lots of tips in. Oh, actually one from Andrew, who said, don't be afraid. Since we began empowering staff late last year out of circa 60,000 customer contacts, empowerment has only been used circa 400 times. So that's nice to know. Gemma said, staff write the procedures that they'll be using. They are closer to the customer and the process and the system, so this is better all round. David, do you think that's a great way of empowering your staff?
Absolutely. You know, people on the front line, they know the exact conversations, they know the process is the best, and you know, like we say, we need to get them involved from the, you know, the agents upwards basically. So they're the people doing it every day and can provide the best feedback. So yeah, I think that's a great tip.
Michael said, in reference to engagement, practice MBWA, management by walking around. Get out of your office on a regular basis and see and hear what is going on in the centre. This also has benefit when a negative communication needs to be made, since frontline folks will know you better. John, to you obviously, yeah, chuckled with that.
Yeah, I remember a great contact centre manager years ago who would leave the office about 4 o'clock every afternoon and make his way out to the door. It would take him about an hour and a half to get out of the office, but he'd just walk through the contact centre floor, chatting with people, finding out what the issues were. He had his sort of jacket over his shoulder, and it was just a great way of finding out how things were in the business, but also saying, I'm actually leaving as well, but I'm going to spend time. So you know, the engagement that he gave was absolutely phenomenal.
Great. We've had another tip in from Stephanie, who said, have a deeper conversation and explain the why behind your requests of your employees. I'm asking you to make this many calls because of X, or I'm asking you to change this because of X. It's nice. Gemma said, involve agents in your recruitment process. This empowers them within really important decision making. Emma, would you say that's a great way that you've seen?
I think it's a great idea. I haven't actually seen that myself, so I'm really interested in that. But I know I've seen it in non-call centre teams, yes, but I think it's a great way of empowering agents, because you know they can have to work with these people, aren't they? So you know it's a great idea, even if it's just we've got this preferred candidate, we're going to bring them in for a coffee or whatever, meet them, let's know what you think. I think it's a great idea, yeah.
I think that's, yeah, just to add to that, I think we touched on it earlier as well. Things like looking at shift patterns and schedules, etc. You know, great to get some feedback from current employees about what works well, etc., what meets the different lifestyle requirements. I've worked in places where we've actually sort of passed out proposed shift patterns to the employees to sort of have a little vote on to say, yeah, we prefer these ones really work, and we're happy with those. All of them will give the correct service levels, etc., because of what the requirement is, but really get them involved in the process.
Great. We've had an opinion sent in from Melinda, who said, we removed average handling targets from agents' focus and scorecards, but the WFM team still monitors and manages AHT. If WFM sees extreme outliers of AHT, supervisors coach to see those agents. We've seen that most agents don't abuse phone time since average handling time targets have been removed. David, would you say that's a sensible one?
Very sensible indeed. So and I think we talk about AHT and how rigorous, not sticking to it, etc. So I like the approach whereby, okay, let's just do some coaching, recognise there may be some issues, might be some new employees. It might even be to do with certain processes, etc. So, I think on this it's really important to look at the context of the AHT. It could be something to do with the agent, it could be a process, and as I say, it's worthwhile taking that time just to review it carefully and see what can be done.
Carolyn, I know this is your favourite subject, AHT.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's important to look at it by call type as well. So it's not unusual that certain types of call will take longer than others and things like that. So make sure you're looking at it in the right context. And also, Melinda, it'd be interesting to see, I don't know when you removed it, but over time, what happens, because sometimes as the years kind of go on where you haven't been monitoring it, you might see that it starts to increase because the focus has gone off it, and that can really start to cause some inefficiencies. So just keep a back office handle on it. Yeah.
Thanks. Harsh has sent in a tip. He said, we have some dissatisfaction around the team commission structure. Tongue-tied. So I asked the team to nominate a panel, and they collectively gathered people's thoughts in and out inputs and create a new plan. Then they presented this to the team along with the reasons why they had chosen the categories they did. There's been a super improvement in associated morale and buy-in to the better good of our business. Emma, would you think that's great?
Yeah, I mean, it's another great idea of giving people autonomy and empowering them to make changes. So I think that's great. Yeah, and I think that's an example where using that appreciative inquiry approach could work really well. So what works already? What could it be like? And how can we get there? So yeah, great example.
And we've had Michael send in his opinion. Agents may not use empowerment, especially in reference to refunds, if they have to document why they did it or if they've been reprimanded for doing so. David, what would you say to Michael to kind of do this?
Okay, so yeah, there's sort of a little block there, isn't it? So I guess we're going back to initially, let's look at the process of how you want to empower the agents and make sure there's no blockers in the way. Make sure that the process is clear, concise, etc., and they're able to do it, and there's no sort of negative reaction if they do attempt to do it. So it should all be aligned.
Great. We've had a tip sent in from Stephanie, who said, I participated in another webinar a few months ago, and the facilitator mentioned asking this, as your manager, what can I do to improve your work life? Which I think is what you were kind of saying, Emma.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. The tip that came through before about managing by walking about. To people who get this, that's really, really obvious. But there are a lot of managers that don't get it and just need a bit of help. So actually, here's a great question you can ask, or how about you just wander around and chat to people? And it sounds really obvious, and you think, I can't believe I have to suggest this, but some of these tips are great for those people that just don't naturally kind of get this stuff, and there are quite a lot of them out there, unfortunately. But giving them some help, some tips, and some examples of what they can really simply do is a great way to kind of move this forward.
And I sort of came across one contact centre where the team leaders sort of thought that management was about actually responding to requests from other people in the organisation by email and being able to respond to those quickly. And what they actually did is they had a series where they allowed their team managers the first hour in the day to do email, and then the rest of it was then walking around helping their team coaching and getting much more involved in coaching of staff, rather than thinking, I've got to respond to requests from my manager by email within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And Carolyn, is this your question that you ask, kind of when you're going into call centres?
Yeah, I mean, it's a key part of employee engagement. So there's two different things here. There's engagement and then there's empowerment, and we're talking a bit about both. And one of the things that I look at when I go into contact centres is the line manager visible as, do they stand out? Are they walking around, or are they sat at their PC. And I'm a big advocate of floor walking and spending time and talking to people, but it's getting the balance right. There is still operational work to do, and they should be doing strategic things, and they should be looking at metrics and performance, and then they should also be engaged with their people. And I've worked in organisations where a level above has said to team managers, you must be floor walking, you must be managing by walking around all the time. And that doesn't work either, because they never get any time to do the strategic things that they should also be doing. So I think it's a good balance, and I think team managers should be supported by another level, which is a coaching and floor walking level as well. And there's all sorts, David can talk to you about this I'm sure, but all sorts of technology that you can use so that you can see who's having a tough call right now, and that your floor walking is a bit more targeted than just kind of randomly spending time pacing around.
Yeah, indeed. We have something called mobile workforce optimization. So it's all about, having a tablet or a phone, etc., and being able to, look to see what teams are doing, etc., from an adherence perspective, and, making sure people are able to respond to any queries correctly. So that's quite a hot topic now in workforce management circles.
Fab, and I suppose as well as your manager, technology, how can that improve your work life is a big thing, David?
Indeed. So, we've talked a lot today about self-service, etc., the ability to view everything relating to your work patterns from home potentially. So you can do things like see what shifts you're on. So we work with organisations with very complex shift patterns. So, they want to know when their breaks are, what type of interaction they're going to do in the following day, the ability to self-schedule, the ability to swap shifts, some of the great things as well that are coming in, they're able to view their own performance. So we've talked today about, how people measure to improve their empowerment. So, not just things from the sort of volumetrics, but also bringing in some quality type metrics or connecting into customer feedback as well. So through things like employee portals, you can see that in almost real time, which is a great thing for the employee to do. So if they're doing a good job, they can see it and they know they're doing well.
Great. I think we've got a few tips left. Advisors can get lost in their day-to-day work. As part of empowerment, first step is to strip things down to basics and allow advisors to really question, why are we here? What really is our job? We've had another one sent in from Gemma who said, have pods where colleagues decide what will happen within the company for a strategic point of view. So give them a brief and scope and see what happens. We've done this here, and our agents have contributed to our value statements, our purpose, and a lot of our customer initiatives. This has been brilliant as it gets automatic ownership and buy-in. Stephanie said, express concern for your associates beyond work and develop a relationship and a goal-setting pattern that allows them to set their own goals based on what their personal life involves. This works for us because of a tiered bonus structure. So I talk with each associate weekly and we discuss, what bonus do you want to meet? What are the steps you need to make to hit that goal? And lastly, are you on target to hit the goal that you set? Which is nice. Ian said, advisors can get lost in their... I think we've read that one out, actually. And finally, Stephanie said, my organisation can set schedules is a hugely empowering element, and I can tell you that even just offering flexibility of an hour window, as well as affording paid time off that they can utilise, really does allow for a better confidence in the company. It reduces turnover for sure. Which, David, I'm sure you'd agree
Fantastic. With. Yeah, Stephanie, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, the more you give control over to employees in terms of their work patterns, the better it will be for reducing attrition. I see that all the time. We've just deployed this week, actually, a big customer at WFM, and they're going down the preference scheduling route. And, it's great to be able to see these people going in and actually choosing what preferences they want to do and provide that type of flexibility.
Great. And Carolyn, do you agree?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and this is linking back to the thing about the recruitment and involving agents in the recruitment process as well. Because if they're having a really great time with how they're choosing their shift patterns, and then you're bringing in a new potential recruit and they're hearing that from them, it's far more powerful than the interviewer as a manager explaining. You'll get that. Sometimes they think, well, you tell me that now, but does it really happen in reality? So, yeah, that's really good.
Great. Back to you, Jonty.
Wonderful. Well, we're reaching the top of the hour, so that's all we've got time for today. In 1 or 2 words, if you could type into the chat room, what did you like about today's webinar? There is a replay and slides available on the recordings page, which will be callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. That will be available in about an hour's time from everyone. We're back in 2 weeks' time, where we're going to be looking at a related subject, which is building a positive culture within the contact centre, which I think is going to be absolutely fascinating. So just like to say thanks to our speakers. Thank you to you, Carolyn, for joining us with your thoughts. Emma, thank you for joining you for our first webinar with us, so thank you very much. David, thank you also for joining as well.
Pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And just thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us. If you'd like to complete the survey as you leave the webinar. So thanks very much. Goodbye, and see you again in 2 weeks' time. Bye-bye.